I'm not ready. You see, that single sentence alone has probably stolen more dreams than failure ever has. Because I'm not ready on the surface. You see, it sounds like you're being responsible. It sounds like we're taking the mature route and saying, I'm not going to start something because I know I'm not totally prepared. But what if that's not really wisdom? And what if it's just a belief that you've repeated so many times that you've stopped questioning whether it was really true? Today, we're going to crush that lie. Welcome to Elevation Requires Change. I want you to think about how many times you said, I need a little bit more experience, or maybe just one more certification, or I'll start next month or next year because I'm not as confident as I need to be. And if I just get one more thing, then I'll be good. And on the surface, that sounds logical. It sounds like a good reason for you to not start something or to not do it. But what if there aren't reasons? What if they're rehearsed beliefs? And if they are, there's something I want you to wrestle with today. And that thing is, who taught you that? Because every belief that you have has an origin, it has a beginning. And so there was a time in your life where you didn't believe that you weren't ready. There was a time where you didn't believe you were smart enough. There was a time that you didn't believe that you could actually lead at the level that you're now leading in. And so what happened? Somewhere between the person you were and the person that's sitting here right now watching this video, someone, something came in and played a critical role in teaching you how to see yourself. But here's the thing, most people will never be able to do that. And we're breaking that because you may be living your life according to conclusions that were never consciously made. Today, we're going to expose 5 of the biggest lies people tell themselves. Not because I'm trying to just simply make you feel better, but I want you to think differently. Because once you see the lie starts to lose its power. And so if you're new here, my name is Demias Purdue. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a retired United States Marine. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a coach. And I'm someone who understands better than many what it is like to build an identity around one chapter of our lives, only to discover that there was another chapter waiting for us on the other side. You see, I spent over 22 and a half years of my life serving as a United States Marine. I've led, I've deployed, I've been to combat, and I built a career where most people would have said, you know what, that's extreme success. But for me, there was more to it. Success doesn't automatically mean fulfillment. And there came to a point in my life where I knew if I was going to become the man that I knew I was capable of becoming, that it wouldn't just be me changing my job. I needed to change the way I operated in totality. I needed to change the way I saw myself. And so in this moment, I knew that the journey wasn't going to be easy, and the journey wasn't easy because there were seasons while I was in the Marines, seasons of depression, seasons of loss when I transitioned. There were moments where I questioned many things, moments where I wondered if I had anything left to offer outside of the identity that I spent decades building. But here's the thing, I always knew there was more to me. And I had to get out of my head and stop questioning it. I stopped trying to become a better version of who I was, and I started becoming the person that my future required me to be. And that shift changed everything in my life. And that's when I went fully into coaching, fully into teaching, fully into speaking, building businesses, helping leaders, helping people rediscover who they are. And now we find ourselves here. And that's exactly what this channel is about. It's about helping you change the way you think so that you can become the person that your future is waiting on. Because I've become convinced of one thing. And that thing is the title of that book that I wrote, Elevation Requires Change. And sometimes the first thing that has to change is what you believe about yourself. So let's get into it because these 5 limiting beliefs are 5 lies. Lies that sound normal to us. They sound realistic because, this is what we've said so many times. And there are lies that millions of people continue to repeat every single day without realizing that they're giving those words permission to shape their future. So let's start with lie number 1. I'm not ready. This is probably the most dangerous lie on the list. And the reason why I say that is because it's the most common. Nobody will ever criticize somebody for saying that they're not prepared. Nobody will ever criticize you for saying that, you know what, you're taking the high road right now because you sound disciplined. You sound like you're making the right decision. But spending so much time in that preparation mode, I've realized has a dark side because preparation becomes procrastination just in a nice, fancy suit. Sometimes preparing really means I just want to protect myself from failing. Think about how many times you've delayed something. Your dream has been delayed because someone kept moving or you kept moving the starting line. This was me. I'll write the book after I learn a little bit more. I'll start the business when I have a little bit more money. I just transitioned. I'll apply for a promotion. This is what I hear when I'm in corporate spaces. I'll apply for the promotion, but I'm not ready yet. You know what? I'll go back to school and I'm gonna get my bachelor's or my master's or start the PhD when things settle down because life is pretty crazy, but life never really settles down. All right, your confidence is going to show up after you start to take action. And most of the confident people that you admire in the world, they became that way building it during the dark times. They became that way during a time where they weren't fully prepared. I remember when I was getting ready to go and do my first keynote, and I remember just standing in front of that audience and knowing that this was the place that I was supposed to be. And I was so confident in that I was not going to allow anything to shape me. I wasn't going to allow anything to shake me in this process. And I remember prepping it. And when I stood up on that stage, I said, this is my time. This is my moment. And I rocked it. I wasn't going to let any limiting belief jump in and tell me that because this was my first time being in a corporate space, that I wasn't going to be able to do it here. There was no way I would do that. I knew I was ready. And so here's the thing that I've learned when it comes to readiness, that thing isn't a feeling. It's a decision. You don't wait until you feel ready. You become ready by doing the thing that you continue to postpone. So press pause in your mind right now and think about the thing that you keep postponing. And so lie number 2 is I'm not good enough. This is the one that's the whisper. This is the quiet one. And it doesn't usually announce itself. This is the one that hides underneath you comparing yourself because you've watched everyone else's success. You've watched them do the things that you wanted to do, and right now you start thinking, you know what? Oh, that's good for them, and you start thinking that you can't do it because you're different from them. Maybe you're not as smart as them. They're more talented or better looking. You have a lisp. You've got a southern drawl. They're more connected. They know more people than you. No, absolutely not. Have you ever noticed that we are incredibly generous when explaining what other people do well, but incredibly critical when we explain ourselves? Think we are incredibly critical when explaining who we are, but we praise everybody else. When somebody else succeeds, we assume that they earned it, they did everything right. But when we fail, we assume it's because of who we are. And now we give ourselves a label, and that's dangerous because becomes one bad outcome becomes this: I'm just not that kind of person. No, that was the outcome, and you cannot make that outcome your identity. Just because you got rejected does not mean that you're rejectable. Let me say that again. Just because you got rejected doesn't mean you're rejected. Maybe you were being protected from something. Maybe you were being protected in this relationship from not jumping in the same toxic one before. Maybe that one speech didn't go well. Doesn't mean that you're a terrible speaker. It means that there are just some things that you need to work on. Maybe it was the pace. Maybe it was your cadence. Experiences are events. Identity is a choice. Do not make the mistake of confusing those two. So let's jump into lie number 3. I don't belong here. That's the lie that follows people into rooms that they've prayed to get into. It didn't stop you from getting the opportunity. It stops you from fully stepping into where you're supposed to be. For years, I would love listening to motivational clips. I would love listening to, and specifically, I would find myself listening to E.T., hip hop preacher. And I would always say that, you know what, one day this dude is going to know me by name. And it wasn't that I simply wanted to know him. I just knew that he was doing the thing that I wanted to do. And with him doing the thing that I wanted to do, I knew that one day, if I continued to do it, we would find ourselves in those same spaces. Again, the lie people tell themselves is they pray to get into a room, and then it stops you from fully stepping into your opportunity. And so here I am now, years later. I'm outside of the Marine Corps, and I'm knowing this is what I want to do. And an opportunity comes to get certified in his program, Extreme Execution. And here I am. I'm in my head. I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going to go to this because if I go to this, then I'm just going to be one of 1,000 people in a room, and I won't be able to be seen. And this is. But then I had to think, you got to do a little bit more. And here's also the powerful part about being with a partner that pushes you. Here's what my bride said. She said, they need to experience you face to face. So it doesn't matter. You're going there for you. And because you're who you are, when you get into the room, you will be seen. I get to the room. I get certified. And here we go. A few months later, I'm starting to teach in the coaching community. And a few months later, I go and I write out, I'm supposed to be here. And within the next year, I'll be called up to teach directly with ET. Less than 30 days later, I was coaching in his mastermind. That I don't belong here lie. Once again, that's the lie that follows people into rooms that they pray to get into. I went from saying that this was something I wanted to do, speaking into existence, and now I fully stepped into that room and I was coaching alongside one of the greatest speakers that there were. And so I share that story with you because you probably walked into a room and immediately started looking around, wondering if everybody else knew something that you didn't, wondering if they had a greater skill set. Okay, maybe you got the promotion, especially in the military. You got the promotion and you might not feel like you deserved it. Or in the workplace, you got it, or you started the business, right? And now you feel like you're being exposed. You got the degree and you feel like you still need some more experience with it. You sit at the leadership table, but you hesitate speaking before because you're convinced that everybody else has more to offer. Look, I've coached executives who make incredible salaries, lead hundreds of people, have decades of experience, and they still whisper to themselves, what if they find out I'm not as good as they think I am? Think about that. They're crazy successful, but success doesn't automatically eliminate insecurity. Sometimes it gives insecurity a bigger stage. And if you give it that stage and you continue to pay attention to it like that, you give it an even bigger light. So you don't have to know everything to belong somewhere. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, if you're always the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. Growth is something that you should be chasing. And sometimes being in those places require you to grow. It doesn't always feel like inadequacy at the beginning. Growth doesn't, because growth introduces you to people who know things that you don't know yet. That's why it's important to get in other rooms. That doesn't make you an imposter. It makes you a student, and you should be an eternal student. Students become experts when they stay in the room long enough to learn. One thing I love about jujitsu is that no matter how much I teach, no matter how long I've been teaching, there is always another way to do a technique. And that technique may come from somebody who just started doing it. It could have been somebody who's been doing it for a year. And I'll learn something because I realize I'm an eternal student. I realize that there are so many things I don't know when I go into it. And so I want you to think about one of the last experiences that you had where you thought you knew everything, but you learned something else. All right, let's press pause for a second. If this conversation is helping you see yourself differently, then I need you to do three things for me. The first thing is I need you to hit that like button. What that does for YouTube is it lets them know that this conversation is worth putting in front of somebody else that might need it. And then the second thing I'm asking you to do is subscribe. The reason why I'm asking you to do this is because we're building a community of people who are committed to becoming the person that their future requires. And finally, I want you to share this with someone. Share it with somebody who keeps talking themselves out of opportunities. And you never know. One conversation, just one conversation, can be the thing that changes someone's direction that they're taking in their life. So let's jump right back into it with lie number 4. This is just who I am. When we start saying that, this is when we're saying that, you know what, I'm comfortable being here. All right. It sounds like self-awareness because I've always been this way. I'm just not a disciplined person. I'm not a people person, or I've always been an emotional person, or I've always had a short temper. This is not the way that we go about it because we're claiming this title, whether it's about being a leader, whether it's about being an introvert, whether it's about being a creator. If you notice something with all of those, they're not just descriptions, but these are declarations, and they become powerful identity statements because you believe something is a part of who you are when the reality is it's not. It's just a thing in the moment. And so I want you to stop trying to change it. Imagine someone saying, I'm just out of shape versus I haven't exercised consistently, so that's the reason why I don't have the body that I want. One describes a current condition. The other one defines a person. We keep using the description of our condition and making it who we are. We do it all the time, whether it's when we talk about procrastination. I used to say I was a procrastinator, right? And I was. But then I had to realize I was giving myself this title. And by me giving myself that title, I started to behave that way. When a person is saying I'm an anxious person, you're constantly going to operate in that way. Your identity will always try to remain consistent with itself. And if you identify with someone who isn't disciplined, guess what? You will unconsciously protect that belief. You will unconsciously protect that identity. That's not true. You are not your habits. You are not the worst season you've ever been through in your life. You are not your biggest mistake. You are not the label somebody else gave you 15 years ago. Here's what you are. You're a human who is capable of learning. You are a human who's capable of adapting. You're a human who's capable of growing and becoming. Don't confuse your current condition with your permanent identity. Now let's jump into number 5. I'll start when I'm confident. Where do you think confidence comes from? Most people think confidence comes first. Then action follows. Life does not work that way. And in no way, you may have tried it before and you've been successful, but life doesn't work that way. Confidence is usually the result of you doing something and not the requirement. Think about everything that you've ever been good at. Think about driving a car, thinking about leading, think about public speaking, teaching a class, coaching, being a parent, being in a relationship. Your confidence did not come on the first time you tried it. You didn't jump on a motorcycle and all of a sudden you already know how to balance, even though the system is designed to do it. You were still nervous. You were still uncomfortable in moments where you first tried. You still made mistakes, but you learned, you adjusted, and you improved. Then that's where the confidence shows up. And the confidence becomes the evidence. Waiting for confidence before taking action is like somebody waiting to become strong before they can walk in the gym. The gym, actually doing the exercises, are the things that make you stronger. Action is the thing that builds the confidence, not the other way around. I know that I've got 22 years of Marine Corps experience. I know I've got 22 years of leadership. I know I've got 22 years of coaching. I know I've built a business. I've built Purdue Leadership Institute with my bare hands. I know I've coached executives. I wasn't confident every day of the process, but I decided to do the things because my future mattered more to me than anything I've ever feared. And so here's something I need people to hear. I want to leave you with this thought. None of these lies announce themselves as lies. None of them do. They all make sense. And sometimes the fact that they make sense, it feels like humility. But I don't want you to mistake their familiarity with any form of truth. Just because you've repeated something for years does not make it accurate. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to catch yourself. I want you to spend this week. I want you to write down the lie that you catch yourself saying most often. I'm not ready. I don't belong. I'm just not good enough. This is just who I am. Or I'll start when I'm more confident. And then I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. Who taught me this? What evidence have I been using that supports it? And what would my life look like if I stopped believing it? Because changing your life rarely starts with your changing your circumstances. It starts with you changing the story that you've been telling yourself about who you are. And I'll leave you with this. We started the conversation out with this. Every limiting belief has an author. The question is whether you're still letting them write your story. It's time for us to take control. It's time for us to pick up the pen. I'm Demyas Purdue. And remember, y'all, elevation requires change. It's time to do the work. Let's go.